What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Around the Clock. For those who are new to the channel, my name is John, and my personal goal is to own, experience, and modify as many unique cars as possible. Today, I'm pretty much going to be doing the most in-depth review of my current project, a 2007 Mercedes-Benz E63 AMG Wagon. And in this video, I'm going to start from the very beginning, how I happened upon the car, why I decided to move forward with it, go over kind of basic functionality of the car and the specs. We can talk about the modifications that were done prior to me getting it, what I have done to it, and I'm also going to highlight any imperfection. I'm going to be real with you guys and just kind of tell you exactly what it is, and lastly what the future holds for the car behind me. So to start the story of how I happened upon this wagon is a little over a year ago. I had a 2010 Mercedes-Benz C63 AMG pre-facelift W204 chassis sedan, and the car that I got was pretty modified from the previous owner. It had a fully built motor, had a Weiss Tech supercharger. It was a pretty rowdy car, and for those who know me and have watched my videos, you know, I'm not really a go fast guy. I'm more of a keep my cars clean, make cosmetic changes, and cruise kind of guy. But what was appealing to me about that car is that it had, you know, a built motor and a supercharger. I've never owned a car that was, you know, had a built motor or had a supercharger on it. So that's what made that unique. Not that C63s are rare or uncommon. It was mainly because of that factor. During my ownership of that car, I did enjoy it. It was obnoxiously loud. Those cars from the factory have a very, very aggressive cold start, even with, you know, just factory. And then this car had headers and nothing else in the way. It just went straight back. So when you would start that car, it would make me jump once in a while because it was just so loud. It was the initial bark. During my ownership of that car, it was really fun to drive it and everything. I could not get over the fact of how loud it was, and I know that there are things that I could have done to kind of maybe quiet it down. But while I owned it, one day I was hanging out with a good friend of mine, Wes, and at the time he had an E92 M3 Club Sport build. So for those who aren't familiar with the E92 M3, you know, they're S65 engine, naturally aspirated V8, high revving V8, and then you can get them with a 6-speed manual or a DCT or a dual clutch transmission. And after driving that car, his had the DCT, I fell in love with it. I love the fact that you could rev it all the way out. I love the fact that the DCT was very responsive, especially compared to the Mercedes automatic transmission. Even with the transmission tune, it was not as responsive. So at that moment, I decided that I wanted an E92 M3. So that meant that I had to sell my C63. So I had it on Marketplace for a while, no real buyers. And then I kind of took a step back and said, you know, I think it would take a Mercedes enthusiast to see the value in this car. So I ended up listing it on a Mercedes forum, MB World. And after, you know, getting it listed, I took a look at the Marketplace to see what was on there. And this wagon showed up. And you know, I'd like to consider myself a car guy. I feel like I'm pretty familiar with a lot of different platforms, but I never knew that they made E63 in this chassis in a wagon. So W211 is the sedan version, the wagon version is an S211. So once I saw that, it immediately caught my attention. One of the first things I did was I asked the owner if he would like to trade the C63 for the E63, but he already had something in mind. He also had a W211 E63 sedan, and he also had an E92 M3, ironically. Once he said he had something in mind, I said no problem, and I would reach back out, you know, if something changed on my end. So shortly after speaking to him, I ended up selling the C63. I reached back out to him, we came to an agreement, and that is how I bought this E63 AMG Wagon. So next, I'll take you guys around the car, just kind of go over basic functionality and you know, show you the things that I fell in love with about it. So here she is, guys. It is a 2007 Mercedes-Benz E63 AMG. So just to kind of give you guys a little background on this car and what makes it so special is the chassis. As I mentioned before, it's considered an S211. The sedan is a W211. But for the S211 E63 AMG Wagon, they only made 153 units for the US market. This is an 07, and in that year, they only made 67 of them. And what makes this car super special and really kind of a fun wagon, especially for an enthusiast, is under the hood you have the legendary M156 engine. And for those who aren't familiar with that, it is a naturally aspirated 6.2 liter V8 with 510 horsepower from the factory. Actually, it's 507 to be technical. And then it has around 470 foot-pounds of torque. So she definitely moves, and I absolutely love the styling of the S211 chassis, just the round headlights. Growing up, my parents had Mercedes, the late 80s. They had these, nothing special, but like a 300 SE. They had the diesel version, and I just remember them being very stout and comfortable vehicles. So that's why I've always had love for Mercedes, and then obviously the AMG models, because they are kind of the sportier versions of Mercedes. So to kind of walk around the car and show you some of the features of it, you can see that obviously you have basic functionality, power seats, all that stuff. And on the inside, cosmetically speaking, I love the look of the seats. You have the perforated leather in the middle, Alcantara in the top corners. You also have like the smoother textured leather along the sides. And while it does show signs of wear, there is no cracking, there are no tears. I do feel like these cars' interiors hold up very well. Now, obviously the inside of this car is very different for several reasons, and I guess we can go ahead and talk about that too. This steering wheel is from a Black Series. It looks OEM. I mean, it is an OEM steering wheel, but it looks like it could have come with the car, because you do have like these dimples on the sides of the steering wheels, which kind of ties in with the perforated seats. And then I like how it's a little bit smaller, and you also have a flat bottom, just gives it that real sporty look. Also, the speedometer goes up to 200. You have your heated and ventilated seats. And also, with this car, how it differentiates, against other wagons or say, performance vehicles is, in my opinion, I've always felt like Mercedes was more on the luxury side than it is on sport compared to, say, BMW or Porsche. I think Porsche and BMW do a very good job of kind of balancing that sport and luxury aspect. Mercedes does as well, especially the AMG models, but I do feel like they are more on the luxury side compared to Porsche and BMW. But one of the awesome things about this car is it does have factory air suspension. And I know that it can be intimidating for those who have never owned a vehicle with air suspension, but I'd say that these cars have been around for a while, which means that there are aftermarket solutions available. So a lot of companies, they make remanufactured struts that you can buy that are a fraction of the price that it would be if you were to otherwise buy it from a dealership. And sometimes when it does fail on these cars, the cheaper alternative is to convert it to shock and strut. But in my personal opinion, I feel like it does change the ride quality of the car, and it does not ride quite as smooth. But on this car, you do still have this button right here, and this allows you to kind of change your driving experience. So by default, it is on like a comfort mode, but if you hit the button once, it'll put it in like a sport 1 mode where it tightens up the suspension a little bit more. And then on the second level, it gives you, I think, probably the sportiest mode that it can go into with the suspension. And also over here, you have the feature to raise the vehicle or lower it. There's only two features, or I'm sorry, two settings. Prior to this car, I have had a couple W220 chassis S classes, which is like 2000 to like 2006. Don't quote me on that, but I had a couple of the AMG versions, and they have what is called ABC suspension, which is hydraulic. It's not air, and I believe it stands for active body control. And on that platform, you had different ride settings. Like there was multiple levels to it, where this is just normal riding height, or you can raise it. Doesn't come up super quick like cars that have front end lift, where it comes up, you know, almost immediately, or comes up pretty quickly. You do have to kind of wait a little bit for it to come up, but that is an awesome feature on this car. As we come around to the back, you can see that you do have the curtains, which is an option. You know, you can just obviously just lift that up and it sits nice and flush in there. Or if you want it a little bit darker, you can actually just go ahead and pull this up and lock it into the hooks. I did tint the windows 20% all the way around, so this does make it just the slightest bit darker in the back for your passengers. But as you can see, that is the interior. I'd say overall, it's in very good shape, especially considering its age and the mileage, which this car does have 146,000 miles. Now, the seller for me, I'm actually about to show you guys. I'm about to show you what made me say absolutely yes to this car. And that is the rear jump seats. Initially, I called this the third row seat. I think the technical term is jump seat, but this was an option if you were to buy this car from the factory. This car was not optioned with it from the factory, but the previous owner added every single thing that it needed to make it fully functional. Absolutely love this feature. I do have two young kids, and they have sat back here before, which is really cool. They even have a spot to put their drinks if they want to. But another feature that I really love about this is if you don't have the kids sitting in the back and you just want to use the cargo space, I'll show you how you can quickly convert it over. So if you don't have anyone sitting in the back and you just want to utilize your cargo space, it's very simple. You pretty much retract the seat belts, put these seatbelt clips into place, and then you fold this down. From here, there is a button underneath the headrest. You can push that in. It folds down and goes down. So you just do that with both. And then now you have your flat area. If you have a pet and you want to put them in here and take it on one hand, and being very unsuccessful with that, but yep, it sits right into place there. And once you've done that, what you can do is you can pull this cover. It's like a cargo cover, and you can pretty much pull this into place. And once it sits here, I'll show you something that is pretty cool. So now that we have that in place, if you just shut the tailgate, now I'll show you. Once we open it again, it's all power. You'll notice that it slides up to kind of give you more room to put everything in. And there's just something in the track that kind of lifts it and takes it with it. But what's really cool too is once you close it, it will actually slide down those tracks and cover it. So you can actually hear it when we drop it. So through the tinted windows, you can't really see, but you know, the tonneau cover slides down. I think that is a super cool, unique feature for the wagon. That is pretty much for like factory specs. Now we can kind of talk about modifications. So when I got this car from the previous owner, what made it stand out to me was not only an extensive list of parts that were replaced, But I really liked the cosmetic changes that he made, and that included the wheels. So these are 19-inch BBS LM154s up front and LM155s in the rear, wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sports. I love the way that they look specifically on this chassis. I know sometimes there are wheels that people say, oh, you put that on anything and it'll look good. And while that may be true, I think that there are some platforms that it looks better on. And this is one of them. I think the LM is absolutely a very fitting wheel for this specific chassis. Another thing that the previous owner had done is he had a carbon fiber front lip. Now, I will say the style that he had on before was different than this style, but it did have some like damage like on the lower side of it. So I ended up replacing to a different style that I thought was a little bit cleaner and kind of fit more the look I was going for. Now, another one of the things that I replaced is the front grille. Not that anything was wrong with it. It just had a lot of pitting, just showing signs of wear for its age. So I did replace that just to kind of clean it up. Another thing that we can highlight is obviously the paint. It does look super fresh, and that is because I did paint correct and ceramic coat this car. So that is why the paint is popping. And, you know, I do keep it in the garage, and I'm very meticulous with how I care for the cosmetics of the car. Now, the previous owner did change some body panels and do some body work, I guess you could say. This is an East Coast car, right? So East Coast, it definitely has some surface rust underneath, nothing on like the frame or any major components, but there is definitely rust on this car underneath. And from what I understand, the hood had some rust on it, and because it's aluminum, the previous owner thought it would be easier to just replace the hood instead of trying to repair it. So that is what he did. He put a new hood and then he had it painted along with the front bumper and the front fenders. Now, the problem that he came across is once you have brand new paint up against weathered old paint, it's gonna stand out, right? One's gonna look fresh, one's gonna look dated. So he ended up painting the whole front, the pillars, doors, rear quarters, and that is it. The rear hatch is still original paint, and so is the roof. But because I paint corrected the entire car, everything does look a lot more uniform, and it doesn't really stand out that the panels have been painted. But this isn't original paint, but I do think that it presents itself well and is a good paint job. I have seen, you know, aftermarket paint jobs, and it can be questionable sometimes, but I think that this is pretty good. Now, to talk about the suspension, right? As you guys can tell, the vehicle is lowered. And when I first got the car, it had what was called a Lomo module. And basically what you would do is when you open up the car and you hold one of the buttons on the steering wheel, there's a setting that would pop up on the cluster that said suspension. And you could use the settings to pretty much adjust the height that you want it at, but it's not as fast as like these aftermarket airlift performance kits. You'd have to kind of find a height, select it, go to the rear, find a height, select it, and then kind of let it sit there and adjust. So it wasn't something that you could do on the fly. I'd say it's something that you'd have to kind of plan for and allow it time to raise. And that's what it had before I did the manual swap, which we're going to be talking about here in a bit. I'm not 100% sure why it didn't work after the manual swap, but my assumption is that maybe one of the parameters it checks for before lowering is the car being in park. And obviously if there's no more park, then, you know, it's not going to see that and it's not really going to do anything. So what I ended up installing were a set of lowering links. And for those who aren't familiar with lowering links, if you have a car that has air suspension or even the hydraulic suspension on these AMGs, they have fixed ride height sensors that tell the computer what height it's sitting at. And depending on the application can determine how you lower or raise it. So for me, I obviously get it to lower the car. And in the front, the shorter you make the links, or it might be vice versa. So the shorter you make the links, the lower it goes, but in the rear, the longer you make the link, the lower it goes. And it might be the other way around, but my wife's Range Rover also has air suspension, and we did links, and on that one, the lower you make them, the lower the car goes. But I've had platforms where the longer you make the links, the lower it goes. So what's awesome about lowering links is they're very inexpensive. If you think about the cost to lower a car on, say, springs or coilovers, you could easily be, $600-700 easy with the cost of the springs and labor to replace it. And then coilovers, you know what that price range could be from, $1,000 to $10,000 and beyond. But the links are a couple $100 and it lowers the car, and you still retain that quality ride, and it retains the factory lower and raise. The lower and raise feature on the inside. So that is what it's currently lowered on, lowering links. Now, after replacing the front lip, I wanted to ensure that the side profile was all matching, so I did add carbon fiber side skirt extensions, and I also added these carbon fiber rear side splitters. Now, when it comes to these S211 E63 wagons, they do not make parts specifically for the wagon when it comes to these aftermarket carbon bits. These are all parts for a sedan. Front lip, that fits perfectly, right? There's not really a difference from the wagon or sedan front bumper. With the side skirts, I believe it was just the slightest bit too long. And just to show you, if you look right here in the edge, you can see just a hair, it stands out. But the rear is lined up, about the same. What I tried to do is have it sit equally so it's one part isn't overhanging more than the other. So, there is just the slightest difference, but most people wouldn't pick up on that, and to me, it didn't bother me. And I would rather leave it like that than try to modify it and trim it, because I'm imagining that it's likely hollow on the inside. So it would just be more work than to just kind of leave it as is. Same thing with the carbon rear diffuser. Now, one thing that I normally do that I really like would be like a carbon rear diffuser. The problem is the sedan version doesn't just bolt up to the factory rear. It does require modification. And for those who aren't familiar with this car, they don't make this rear bumper anymore. So the thought of kind of, modifying the rear bumper that's not made anymore was kind of nerve-wracking. So I never committed to it because I do think it looks clean without it, and it does kind of tie into the rest of the clean look of the car. So moving along here, you also have the Wisp roof rack bars, and I absolutely love these because they're very low profile. It's not like they go up and across, they're just straight across, so it's really low profile. The fitment is perfect, and it doesn't stand out and make the car look bulky or anything. Now, I do have a cargo box you can see hanging up here. It is a Thule Motion 3, I believe, in a large size, and I did get it in gloss black, and I also did a partial wrap on the existing lines of the box in chrome, just to tie in with the car's silver and chrome accents, like the wheels and then the trim and things like that. I currently have it off the car just because I'm not really taking it anywhere to where I would need it, but it does become helpful. Say you have 7 people in the car. The moment you put up those rear seats, you then lose all of your storage space. So that is kind of when, the box comes into play. But one thing I absolutely love about this car is it is hard to find something that can accommodate 7 people but still stand out at Cars and Coffee in a very unique way. And there have been times where I've actually done, you know, a Cars and Coffee or something like that in the morning, and then we took my daughter to lacrosse practice right afterwards. It's just a very, very functional car, and I love that about it. Now, another cool and kind of uncommon modification that this car has on it is it does have this. And that is a Rentec carbon fiber airbox. Was installed by the previous owner. I do think it looks obviously pretty cool to have some carbon under the hood. I can't tell you that I noticed any difference from stock or this because it came with it. So I do know that it is a very uncommon piece, and I believe the cost of that airbox is somewhere around $4,000 if you can find them. It also has Weistech oil catch can, but otherwise the engine is bone stock, and that's how I wanted it. So moving on to modifications, I did touch on the Black Series steering wheel. Also, I will show you the other things, such as this radio. So this radio is called a Dynavan 8, and it is a wireless CarPlay radio, much like other aftermarket stereos. It does have like an Android system that it runs through, but it is Bluetooth, it's wireless, and I love how it fills the space, mainly with screen, right? You don't have a bunch of dead space with big bulky buttons, right? It's a little more modern, but to me it doesn't look as tacky as I think it could look with an aftermarket radio, to where you buy a dash kit and there's a bunch of like dead space and the screen's only, you know, filling up a fraction of that space. This space is well utilized with screens, so super happy with it. I've never had an issue with it. It always works seamlessly, and it just looks really good. I think it fits the platform and everything very well. Talking about the modifications from the previous owner as well, this car actually has a full sound system. So it has component speakers up front, it has coaxial speakers in the rear, and it also has an amplifier and a subwoofer that's installed on the car. And the beauty is it's all hidden behind the OEM panel, so you would never know that this car has a aftermarket stereo unless you listen to it and you're like, wow, that sounds very clear, and the bass is, you know, a lot louder than I would expect for a factory sound system, and that is because it has an aftermarket stereo. So this has a nice story behind it. So to talk about this wiggly stick, after owning this car for, you know, a couple months or so, I felt like I was at a point to where there was nothing left for me to change. And what I mean by that is cosmetically speaking, because the previous owner had pretty much given me a really good platform to start with and build off of, there really wasn't a ton to do, you know, like the cargo box and all the carbon stuff, you know, and replacing little cosmetic stuff here and there, even to like here, like this trim piece. This was getting sticky over time, and I did try to use the isopropyl alcohol trick, and it did make it better, but it still did not look 100%. So there are things that I went around and replaced, like this, right, because that wasn't working. Or even the window switch, like this button was stuck and it was faded, so I replaced the entire panel here, or control board switch, the buttons. And those are the types of things that I did. And once I did all the cosmetic stuff, I just enjoyed it for a while and even considered selling it at one point. But then I was having a good conversation with my friend Brian. Is somebody that I met about 10 years ago, and at the time he had a W211 E63 AMG with a Weistech supercharger in it. So that is the W211 chassis as well, earlier model, like 03 to 06, and that has the supercharged 5.4 liter V8, and his had a Weistech supercharger on it. So when we first met, you know, I thought the car was pretty cool. But then he talked about wanting to swap it to a manual, and that is when he really caught my attention. I said, let's please stay in touch, because the thought of having a four-door German you know, sedan, right, with a supercharged V8 and a 6-speed manual, I think that seems like it would be pretty cool. I know like CTSV would be like, you know, a comparable American version, but personally, I just like the German stuff. I like the quality of the build. And so we stayed in touch, but the car ended up making too much power, and he just decided not to do the manual swap. So in recent conversation last year, I'd say probably a little later last year, jokingly I said, what if we did my wagon? And he said we could, and that is when we decided to move forward with it. So right off the bat, I told myself, if I'm going to commit to doing a manual swap to this car, I want it to look, feel, and drive OEM. So as if it rolled off the factory showroom floor with the transmission. That's what I wanted it to be, right? And that usually means utilizing as many OEM parts as possible. Once I committed to doing it, we started the search for the parts. So the transmission that I sourced for this E63 came out of an SLK Mercedes. It is a R171 716.669. The clutch and brake pedal assembly is from a European W211, because in other countries they did make diesel versions that were manual. And the transmission and the clutch brake pedal assembly were probably the hardest things to get and to source. Thankfully, my friend Brian had the clutch brake pedal assembly from when he was gonna do his manual swap, so I just bought that from him. But then sourcing that transmission, at the time there was only one in the entire country, and you know, I had to secure it right away. But I also utilized the OEM clutch because this is a big, heavy vehicle. I went with the OEM dual mass flywheel. So the dual mass flywheel is obviously not going to be as fast, but you know, I'm not banging gears in this wagon. I have no intention on making it any faster. But one of the most common questions that I do get is that you know, people inquire if the transmission can handle the power and the torque, right? Because SLKs, the little tiny roadsters, don't really have that much power, even the AMG versions, but the transmission absolutely can. It just really depends on if you're trying to make higher horsepower numbers and things like that, then you want to make sure that you get a beefier clutch, something that can really handle that. But then, you know, I don't want to say the downside of that. Sometimes you can get, you know, a clutch or whatever with that has chatter and things like that. And, you know, just thinking about the application itself, it's not a race car to me. This is a luxury wagon, right? So I want it to be comfortable, and it does hold the power very well. It runs and drives as it should, and it really changes the entire driving experience of this car. I did have to get a custom drive shaft made. So the AMGs have a 4-bolt flange and the manuals have a 3-bolt flange. So when I had the custom drive shaft made, they did a hybrid. So I had a 4-bolt flange on one side and a 3-bolt on the other, and that was the way to go. Initially, I was trying to just have it extended, but all of the companies that I reached out to either had no interest in doing it, or they just did not have the resources or the right tools to do it. So custom was the way to go, and it wasn't terribly bad considering the cost of extending it. Once everything was mechanically installed with the transmission swap, the next step was tuning, which there are layers to. So my buddy Brian, who did the swap for me, had access to Zentry, which is Mercedes' factory program, and there are different levels to it. There's, you know, standard Zentry, there's a developer mode, and then there's another program called Vediamo, which allows you to mess with the car's ECU, things way above my head. And from my understanding, I believe the electronics in the earlier model W211s are different than the later models. By earlier model, I mean like say an E55 is 03 to 06. In 07, the electronics changed. So before, in the earlier models, you'd be able to access things like the ABS module through Zentry, but in 07, they changed it and the ABS module was then separate. So ever since the manual swap had been done, after he made the changes through Zentry, there was still an ABS light. And with that ABS code, also affected traction control. It also affected the electronic power steering in the car. And though the steering was still good, it wasn't as bad as not having power steering. It wasn't as light as it should have been having the electronic power steering. And several things like that did affect the driving experience. Also, if you were to go wide open throttle, you wouldn't be able to rev it all the way out to, I believe, 7,000 RPMs is about as high as it goes up to. Cut power off around 5,000 RPMs. But what was very strange is, for a while, we were trying to figure out this ABS code, because I initially dropped the car off to Brian in October, and by November, everything was in, transmission was in. He did everything he could with the Zentry program. It just had this ABS light. And at the time, it was, you know, a cold winter in Maryland, and I wasn't necessarily in a rush to get it back, so I didn't mind him taking the time to figure out what it was. But at the time when we did this swap, there were no other E63s that were manual swap that we were aware of or that we could reach out to. So it eventually got to a point to where I think February came around, the weather was starting to get a little bit nicer, and I was getting antsy, and I just wanted the car back, and pretty much asked him if the car is drivable. And he said it's absolutely drivable, it's just there's an ABS light, so you're not gonna have ABS, you're not gonna have traction control, and things like that. So I ended up taking delivery of the car, I believe around March, and you know, it's just driving it, taking it to shows. I've driven it everywhere, and it was completely fine. The only things that were affected when that ABS light was on is, obviously, aside from the things that I mentioned before, if you were to go wide open throttle, it would cut power at around 5,000 RPMs. But what was very strange is, very randomly, after a certain amount of key cycles, I didn't really keep track of it, but sometimes you'd go to turn the car on, there would be no light on. And it was very random, because for a complete driving cycle, until you shut the car off again, it would stay off, which was nice to have, but it still didn't drive 100%. Even when the light went off, if you tried to go wide open throttle and rev it all the way out, it would cut off power around like 5,500 versus, you know, 5,000 RPMs. So I've been driving the car, it's been completely fine aside from that light. And recently, I had learned that there was a E63 AMG that was recently converted to a manual, and it was a sedan. It was completed, it was done by the guys over at DC Motor Works. And once I learned that, I reached out to pretty much the main guy in the Mercedes swap world, Josh Chase with Mercedes Swap Shop. And when I reached out to him, he was very responsive, and the process was overall pretty quick. What I ended up doing is I ended up dropping the car off to my buddy Brian. He helped me remove the ECU, get it out to Josh at Mercedes Swap Shop. He was able to kind of recode the ECU and sent it back with a manual controller that also had to be wired in. I don't think it was something super difficult to wire in. I believe it's only 4 wires, but at the same time, for me, it was like way above me, so I had Brian handle it because I trust him and he obviously knows what he's doing. So once the ECU came back and the manual controller was installed, no more lights. The car runs and drives as it should. No lights, you can rev it all the way out. You got your traction control, your electronic power steering. It's just like factory, even down to the fact where, you know, if you have a car that's automatic, you normally have the park reverse neutral drive on the cluster, that's all gone. It really is like an OEM finish, like from pedals and all the matching covers on it. Like the finish of the pedals are like silver and they have these little rubber spots on it. Like that is the same from all 4 pedals. I say the 4th because the e-brake pedal on these cars is a pedal. Even down to the trimming of the OEM trim panel for the shifter. Now, I did try to find one for a manual, but when I found manual W211 trim panels, the shape of it was different, and I did want to retain the factory location of the air suspension features. So Brian took his time, and he spent a lot of time actually you know, getting it trimmed, because you really only get one shot. If you mess it up, you gotta buy a whole new piece. But he did such a fantastic job with that, and I couldn't be happier with the car. So now that I've shared all the details of the car, we'll go ahead and check out some footage that I took of starting it up, taking it for a drive, going wide open throttle a little bit, just to show you what it looks like on the inside, what it sounds like, and everything like that. So now that we've gone over the details of the car, you got to see some POV footage inside driving it. I wanted to close out this video by sharing one last quick story. So recently there is an event that happened in the area. It's called Grassroots the Invitational. It's usually in New Jersey. And pretty much the people that organize it send you an invite And the stuff that shows up is usually top tier, whether it just be tastefully modified, rare, uncommon cars, just right up my alley. And it only happens once a year, and I was planning to go this year with the wagon, but unfortunately the weather had other plans. The show was on Saturday. I had gotten a room on Friday. We were gonna stay the night and go to the show, but unfortunately the weather wasn't looking in our favor, and the rain date was Sunday, which is Mother's Day, and that is a non-negotiable for me. You know, spending time with the wife and the kids and the family takes priority. So I wasn't able to make the show. However, prior to the show, the organizer of that event had sent me a message and said that a company called Fitman Industries was going to be in town, and that they wanted to kind of do some features on some unique rides, and he thought that mine would be worth them featuring. So that was super flattering to hear. And on Friday, I ended up meeting up with them in the Port Imperial, Weehawken area, New Jersey. And we spent the day shooting, you know, still photos, and also they did a video. So the last thing that I wanted to do is kind of share that with you. But before we roll into it, I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to watch the video. This, unfortunately, will be my last video with the wagon until it goes to its new owner. As I mentioned, this week it should be going live on Cars and Bids, and we will see what happens. But if you want to follow what's next and you enjoyed the content, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next video.
What is love?